My name is Peter, and together with Steven, we're going to talk through a couple of topics today. Where, first of all, I would like to set a bit of a macro perspective of how we see AI changing data workflows. We then talk a little bit about what's the role of data observability in this trend. And then finally, I hand over to Steven, who is going to talk you through our product and how we actually materializing some of these learnings and some of these approaches to a Sync product. But before we start, I think the useful way to anchor this conversation is around a concept I would call data development workflow. Essentially, as we are building data and delivering use cases to the business, we have to go through a couple of stages. We have to do planning, where we decide what use cases we're solving for and what we need to build. Then we actually go into the build mode, where we build data models and necessary pipelines to deliver the data. We should be doing testing on the way, so we're deploying tests whenever it's monitoring for anomalies or testing in platforms like dbt. And then finally, we ship data to operations, where we actually run it in production and deliver new and fresh data every day. And finally, we power analysis. If you look at this entire workflow, even today, what we already see is that this entire workflow is already getting reinvented with AI. And perhaps one of the things for myself, being in technology for almost 20 years, what is actually very surprising is how fast this is happening. And we see a lot of changes across this entire workflow happening in a matter of quarters, which perhaps just a couple of years ago would take a lot longer. If you think of where this change is happening, I think it's fair to say that the first attempts to reinvent this workflow with AI started actually in the very end, where we started to optimize how data is surfaced to the business, and we want to create this kind of mythical self-serve experience where suddenly with AI and increasingly powerful semantic engines, this is becoming more and more feasible. On the other side, I think in the last couple of quarters, we've seen really a revolution of coding. And we see this in software engineering that is already changed and the entire workflow is reinvented. And of course, this innovation is not staying with software engineering alone, but it's actually getting into the data engineering and analytics engineering as well. And so we see a lot of innovation with AI on both of these ends of the workflow. And in the middle, we see a role of data observability really evolving and also applying a lot of AI technologies to optimize the workflows, especially around testing and operations of data in production. Perhaps other way we can look at this is through the lens of evolution of data observability, which is playing this new role. It started with relatively kind of foundational layer of technologies where we are starting with collection of data. And so to power any of observability, we need to have connections to the underlying data platforms and communication platforms, and ultimately extract all the details of what's happening. So it's logs, schema, lineage, column level lineage, or lineage down to the CTEs and code. And on the other side, we need to be able to deploy some testing into the platforms. So we developed solutions like anomaly monitoring for volume freshness and additional types of more customized monitors. But what we've learned over the last few years that even though this was helpful, it was never really enough because teams were almost like overloaded with a lot of signal of what's happening in the platform, but really didn't have powerful and strong workflows. And this, I think, was this, let's say, evolution which happened over the last few years, where instead of just surfacing raw observability data, we started to develop workflows. And so in Sync, we today power multiple different workflows, from helping teams define data products to helping them understand and operationalize ownership, deploy monitoring, run incident management to address the issues as they come, or even do things like quality analytics around quality of data itself. But even though this workflow is now relatively standard and is becoming more and more dominant and available across the industry, I think the AI is really changing the game. And it's really, I think of it as an intelligence layer which sits on top of this workflow. So it's kind of yet another level of functionality which is coming to the market. And the way how we think of this is that historically, observability was predominantly passive component of the data stack. It's not moving data, it's sitting on the side, it's observing what's happening and helping teams alert and potentially resolve issues, but it's not really doing the job or doing the workflows. And so with the advent of the technology, we actually think that observability will more and more be pushing to day-to-day workflows across this entire landscape. And so perhaps we start with the incident management we're going to show very shortly, but the vision we see for the future is that actually the entire workflow from definition of products to ownership to improving monitors, incident management, and even running quality analysis will be increasingly automated. And the rudimentary actions which now have to be done by humans will more and more likely be done by observability platform. And that led us into kind of a lot of discovery to understand where should we actually start, because all of this is inevitably going to be a lot of work. But actually, there are a few areas where the current technology can already do a lot of good work, and we've increasingly see that it's able to drive the value, and it's able to actually replace some of the workflows previously done only by people. We think of it as a data quality agent, which is essentially operating in these two areas of helping teams deploy monitoring, aka can we build the AI which is suggesting better tests and monitors. And on the other side, it's automatically running incident management. So if the issue happens, instead of the person having to review and triage and collect all the details, all of this is done by Sync AI. Ultimately, you can think of what we built as an autonomous agent, which is focused on quality, which recommends and improves tests, and proactively analyzes and resolves data quality issues. We think of it today, and what we're going to show in a demo shortly, in these two capabilities. One, how can we help deploy better tests and monitors? And second, how can we, instead of surfacing alerts, surface recommendations with the root cause analysis? The important bit which we've been thinking about at Sync is not just what the agent will do, but also how is it going to go about it and what kind of things we can do perhaps differently than other solutions on the market. And we've decided on a couple of pillars I would like to just highlight before we jump to the demo. First of all, we think of Scout as a fully autonomous agent, which fully takes the workflow. And the way to kind of conceptually think about it is that you can think of AI solutions on a scale. On one side, you have chatbots, where you're essentially in the flow, you're interacting back and forth with the AI. But ultimately, this is not really taking that much work away. You have to be kind of thinking about next steps, and you have to be guiding the process. On the next level, we have assistants. Solutions like Cursor today are excellent assistants in coding, for example, where the assistant is taking more and more multi-steps workflows, but as a human, I'm still in the loop. So at least every now and then, I have to interact with Cursor, give it the new prompt, perhaps guide it certain direction. And finally, we have agents, and that's the area where we opted into, where what we want to do is, instead of a human starting the process, we want all of this to run automatically in the background based on observability events, which means that we really need to take the workflow away from the person and actually run it all in the background. And so Sync as an agent is reacting to alerts or events which happen in the data stack and in the background doing the work. And only when it reaches certain types of conclusions, it's surfacing it back to the person. Second important thing we realized is that we want to keep data practitioner in control. And so even though Scout is taking non-trivial amount of work away and running it in the background, where it might go and run a number of queries to the warehouse, review all the commits, perhaps review PR, look at a couple of different options how issue could be resolved, it eventually comes with the conclusion. But the conclusion is not executed until a human has a chance to review and perhaps in some cases correct the conclusion which was made, but in most cases just accept it and follow through. That means that ultimately the person is still in control of actually executing what the agent is doing. And lastly, we believe that all of this has to work in the platform where you do your work, which means that we don't want to lock all of this functionality into Sync, but we're actually working on the solutions where we, in case of, for example, recommending tests or diagnosing issue, we are opening PR into the underlying data platform, be it dbt or SQL Mesh. In that way, we really lean into the analytics engineering workflows where we recognize that a lot of teams want and will keep all of their testing and then code fixes, of course, in the code base. And so we want to go there with you and push it into the code. And with that, I think that's enough of me talking without the product. And I will hand over to Steven, who's going to talk you through a demo where you will see some of this in action.
Perfect. Thanks, Petter. So I'm excited to showcase Scout AI live in action for you today. Feel free to jump in at any point with any questions. But first, let me set the scene for those who may not have seen Sync previously. So for context, behind the scenes, we built a demo workspace, a DAG from the ground up, based on a publicly accessible New York City taxi data set. And our approach at Sync, as per our best practice guidance, is to anchor data products within the observability layer so that data practitioners like yourselves can focus on what's important for the business. So what are those logical groupings of assets that are actually delivering value to the business? This could be anything from a finance metric or revenue report through to a group of core staging models, marketing automation pipelines, through to a single BI dashboard in tools such as Omni. And the value proposition here for this status view of a data product is, rather than looking at thousands of assets individually, there's a single view that can answer some of the hard questions, like how did my nightly pipelines run? Were they successful? What's the status of my data product? What's the status of the pipeline upstream of my data product? And this fosters a sense of trust and transparency into the overall data quality based on use cases that you actually care about. So let's look one level deeper. So we'll look into the revenue reporting aspect of my New York City taxi company. I'll draw your attention to the top left, and we've aggregated assets related to this revenue reporting use case from across our data platform, whether it's your warehouse, so ClickHouse in our case, or the transformation layer, so SQL Mesh and dbt models. This is P1, so it's business critical, down to P3, which could be exploratory use cases. The accountable owner is the finance data team, so the team that receives the alert and takes action. Then for each data product, we have a quality score. So the quality score for this data product aggregates the performance of controls, such as tests and monitors, across these 6 governance metrics from accuracy through validity. And this is based on controls both on the data product, so on the assets within the data product, but also upstream as well. So again, we're testing in pipelines to build that trust in data quality. And then lastly, we have the data product level lineage. So this is a lineage view that both technical and business stakeholders can come and consume in order to understand where the use case in question sits in relation to use cases upstream and downstream. And I won't go into too much detail today, but with everything in Sync, we take things to the next level, to a deep level. So we can also traverse table level lineage, column level lineage, and uniquely in this space, code level lineage as well, which is really powerful, where as a practitioner, you can look into code and understand how a column has been derived in code through multiple CTEs, which proves really valuable when reducing mean time to resolution. But we're here today to focus on Scout AI. And in the first webinar in this series, we honed in on incident management. So for those who didn't catch that webinar yet, I'll give a light introduction to what that looks like, in addition to covering the testing and monitoring advisor as well. So I'll start by reflecting on what did issue and incident management look like before Scout AI. Well, as data practitioners, you're probably aware a dbt test can fail, a SQL Mesh audit can fail, or an anomaly can be detected by a Sync monitor. And then the alert is sent to the accountable owner, so the finance data team in this context. And then the onus is then on yourselves as the data practitioners to go in and troubleshoot and take steps to resolve the issue in a timely manner. And having spoken with thousands of data teams and practitioners, all different sectors, all different sizes of companies, it typically takes, on average, 30 to 40 minutes to resolve each of these issues, which you can see in our triage view and sync. And the steps to resolve such issues can be to correlate issue and incident history, look at issue interdependencies, data analysis such as profiling, segmentation, sampling, reviewing code commits, logs, schema. You get it, lots of different tranches of avenues in order to optimize the time to resolution. And this takes a lot of time, and it takes data practitioners away from what they really want to do, which is innovating and building. So cue Scout AI in the context of incident management. So everything I've just mentioned, all of those steps, Scout does behind the scenes autonomously. And you can consider Scout as your AI data SRE that's working in the background 24/7, doesn't need PTO. And it's auto-triaging issues, such as 3 issues here. It's grouping issues together that are related, and it's providing recommended actions, such as declaring incidents, marking things as expected, and so forth, and drawing its own conclusions. So it's saving a significant amount of time. If you want to see multiple examples, take a look at our previous webinar across DBT and sync monitors. But I'll briefly show an example of a sync monitor in the context of our demo dataset for New York City taxis. So in this case, one of the monitors has triggered. And if we take a look on screen, the revenue across all of our taxi vendors typically follows quite a strong seasonality pattern. As of July, the revenue actually dropped down to 0 across all of our taxi vendors. It's definitely caught my attention. It's something I want to take a look at. As we can see at the top here in the impact assessment that's automated, it's impacting my P1 data products related to core models as well as my finance use cases. And Scout has actually drawn its own conclusion, and it's identified that this is actually a data pipeline failure. But what's really powerful here to call out is that Scout has ruled out the fact that this is a code issue. By checking recent Git commits and so forth. It's ruled out any schema changes that have occurred recently, and it's really honed in by traversing lineage right to the source to identify that this is a raw data ingestion pipeline issue. So it's done all of the troubleshooting that I listed before and taking me right to the root cause. So I could go ahead and take the recommended action. I just want to call out as well, as AI is growing and transparency is key, Scout also provides a sequence of evidence into how it actually derived that conclusion. So it's checked recent Git commits, it's checked the code, issue correlation, issue history, and it can also provide the actual queries that you can go ahead and replicate in order to further validate the conclusion that it's made. And in this case, it's identified it's right at the source ingestion as opposed to any joins or transforms that have impacted the intermediary layers down to the MART layer. So that saved me at least 30 minutes from troubleshooting myself. And I can go ahead and take the recommended action, which is to declare an incident. And in typical Scout fashion, it's done the heavy lifting. It's provided all the context that I need to work with the team to go ahead and actually resolve this issue. It's important to call out as well, this is now an incident, so not every issue is an incident, as that leads to a lot of noise. So you can explicitly declare an incident in sync, which is a critical workflow that our teams leverage. But as a next stage, let's see how we can improve our testing and monitoring with Scout AI as well. So it's always on, it's working in the background, and Scout in this case is our AI-powered testing advisor. As data practitioners on the call, you know that testing and monitoring is important, it matters, but it's actually hard, it's difficult, and it takes up a lot of time. So for context and orientation on screen, you can see a view the schema view. So this is the asset level within Sync. So we've seen the data product level. Now we can see individual assets where we can understand schema, logs, recent code changes, any metadata that we've brought in from dbt and SQL Mesh and so forth. So we can see all the tests that have been deployed at the asset level, so the top level of the asset, so the view or the table, as well as the column level as well. Traversing the screen, another single click of a button to suggest more tests, Scout can actually provide its own recommended tests, either from the outset or to augment the existing testing strategy that's already been deployed. And in this case, Scout has actually suggested 8 additional checks, which we can go ahead and accept or reject. And these can include things like freshness checks or not null checks, which we can zoom into in addition to business rule checks. So the total amount in this case reflects things like the fair amount, surcharges, congestion charges, and so forth, which is in the context of my business. And it's important to call out the suggestions that have been made are in the context of your business. It takes into consideration where this asset resides in lineage, the code commits, and also issue history as well. So what issues have fired recently that were false positives, which issues were potentially missed recently as well. And the consideration of lineage is really important as we can reduce redundancies by deploying and propagating checks over lineage itself. And it's important to know as well, when we go and click accept, that the actual checks are abstracted away from the underlying platforms. So in addition to clicking check here and deploying a sync SQL test, we can also deploy and send a PR down into dbt and SQL Mesh to unify that existing testing strategy that we've got in place. So as I hone in to one of these checks, what's really important is context. So it's all well and good just deploying these checks, but if it's just generic and based on a few high-level prompts, that's not really maintainable and it's not very scalable. So I'll take you now over to our Scout AI settings within Sync. And what this enables us to do from the outset is actually configure some fine-grained prompts for Scout to act upon. So this first prompt here can actually inform Scout about your business. So the data environment, it can understand the nature of your business, any nuances, key business entities, data sets, and workflows. And in my example, as I've said from the outset, we're working on the New York City taxi data set. So I can highlight the nuances around yellow and green taxi trips and go into as much detail and granularity as needed. In practice, we see customers deploying 2 to 3 pages of context, and that's just the right amount of context in order to inform Scout and provide actionable decision-making from a auto-triaging and testing recommendation approach. Secondly, as well, I want to actually inform Scout about my testing strategy. So this prompt box here will actually inform Scout AI's testing advisor, guiding the types of tests and monitors that should be deployed on different types of data assets. And we're finding this is actually proving really impactful and really effective for the medium to large data teams that we work with. As essentially, rather than individuals going off and deploying their own strategy or deploying a crude or test strategy, which just leads to a number of alert fatigue, essentially. From the get-go, we can actually define a consistent strategy that everyone gets behind, and it's much easier to maintain in time. So what we can see is I've deployed a testing strategy that's in relation to our reliability guide, which you can get online. But just at the high level, we recommend not to test everything crudely, but to test in layers. So at the source layer, check things like volume and freshness to make sure you're testing right at the source, so monitoring everything upstream effectively. Then test joins and transforms in the aggregate layer, and then business rules and logic more so in the mart layer as well, so testing in layers. And just if I flick back to the example I showed earlier, so this is a New York City taxi view right at the source layer of the warehouse. And as you can see, it's adopted freshness checks for timeliness, as well as not null checks for completeness as well. So it's very much in line with the testing strategy that I've adopted from the outset with Scout as part of one of our initial prompts. That's everything I wanted to show from a demo perspective today, but just to round up, the outcome that this can help deliver is a robust testing strategy. It can maximize the chance to catch actual issues and as a consequence, minimize alert fatigue. So the aim is never to test anything and everything because you'll just be inundated with alerts. And ultimately through auto triaging and the deployment and creation of tests, which can then be pushed down into your platform due to the level of abstraction, we're ultimately saving a significant amount of time for data practitioners like yourselves and data teams as a whole. So there's a significant amount of value that we're already seeing based on the customers that are in production with Scout AI. And it's really simple to get started. That's everything I have to share today.